Your self-image is your choice. And that can be hard to believe. We get influences from parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, employers, our friends. We even get influences from the media, from strangers. And sometimes the part that all of these other people play can seem incredibly overwhelming. So let's talk about how to resist those influences, build a strong, positive self-image, so that we can get value from self-help. Let's start with, what is the self-image? What is this thing? You'll hear self-image, self-esteem, self-concept, self-care, self. You'll also hear narcissism, the obsession with oneself. So what is self-image? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory. It is the mental image that we have of ourselves. And when we're children, that self-image is built for us by primarily our parents, then siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, people in our life. Then around 12 to 13 years of age, when you become a young adult, you start building the skills to build your own self-image. And so throughout your teens, into your 20s, you are building your self-image, one, by the choices that you make, but also with the guidance and influences of teachers, friends, relatives, family, everybody around you. And then, of course, when you get your first job, your self-image can be significantly influenced by the people for whom you are working. So when you think of yourself, your self-image, the picture that you have of yourself, are you constantly late? And you say, well, that's just the way I am. Are you ambitious to get things done? So on your school work, when you get home, do you get your homework done right away? Do you read extra stuff? Now, are you interested in learning and achieving? What are people around you saying? If you exhibit some natural skill at football or chess or whatever it is that you have a natural skill in, are people saying, oh, you are that thing? You know, football is your thing, chess is your thing, debate club is your thing. Because when people say that kind of stuff, that's a really big influence on your self-image, how you see yourself. And initially, obviously, it sounds like a good thing. Where it can become difficult, where it can become problematic, is that you start to slot yourself into being just that thing. I just recently saw an interview with Michael Jordan, and he was talking about the effort he had made to go play baseball. And he was saying that a lot of people saw that as a failure, that he tried to play baseball. His batting average was, I believe, .202, so he was only hitting the ball 20% of the time. But, wait a second. This is a guy who went to play Major League Baseball, facing the best pitchers in existence, and he's still hitting the ball 20% of the time. An outstanding batter hits the ball 30% of the time. That's somebody who's just amazing at the plate. They're batting 300. So he's batting 200. That, I don't know, that to me seems like pretty good success. The fact that he was able to go play the sport at all at a professional level seems like a really good success. But there were lots of people, and still are lots of people, who will look at that and say, oh, that's a failure, he failed at baseball. No. And there's a key thing. Because Michael Jordan sees it as a success too. And so his self-image is, I went and played professional baseball, and here's how I succeeded at playing professional baseball. You see how that's a positive influence on his self-image. Now, there are two things that are true about your self-image and your creative imagination. Now, the next positive numbered episode, 110, I will be talking about creative imagination. And actually, this is a good moment to mention the even numbered episodes from this one, 108, until 150 are actually, or will be, a playlist that builds on the video I did earlier on how to get value from self-help. You may have heard me say I work with Stephanie Hoden, and we teach success principles together. We do different workshops on it. One of the things that we have noticed is a lot of people come into the workshops without a foundation. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it would be really helpful to that person if they had a foundation when they came in. If they understood some basics about how to get value from self-help. So that when they come into a workshop that is as intense as something like the success principles, they are in a much stronger position to get value from that self-help material. So I decided to put together a series of videos, hopefully all around 30 minutes or less, which is why I have a script. Hopefully I stick to it. Ideally 20 minutes or less. And the reason for that is I just need to be careful about how much time I'm investing in this, because I do have other things to do. But I also want to invest the time, because I think this is something that for anyone who is interested in self-help, this is a good foundation, a good place to start. Watch these videos, take value from them, and understand none of these videos is going to be complete. I'm going to talk to you about self-image for 30 minutes or less. There is no way I can cover everything. To do self-image, I do 3-day workshops just on self-image. And there are entire books written about self-image and how to build a strong, positive self-image. So I will do my best. I will cover what's in the script and share with you useful information. But understand that all of these videos are really just working at giving you a foundation. You know, that basic starting point. So, back to the script. Your self-image and your creative imagination. There are two things that are true. These are like the keys to a car. The ignition key and the trunk key. One, everything you vividly, repeatedly imagine is taken to be true by your self-image. So if you are always imagining yourself late, you are always imagining yourself dumb at math, you are imagining yourself as, I don't like reading, your self-image is going to accept those things as true. This is what we refer to, and you'll hear this said a lot, that you have an automatic success mechanism. And we do, we all do. Human beings are goal-striving mechanisms. We are always working towards something. And people will talk about if you build a strong positive self-image, you get an automatic success mechanism. If you build a negative self-image, you get an automatic failure mechanism. I take a slightly different approach. no matter what your self-image, you will succeed at what your self-image is. If your self-image is one of failure and negativity, then you will succeed at being negative and failing. If your self-image is of someone who is consistently improving, growing, becoming a better person, then you will succeed at growing and becoming a better person. So everything you vividly, repeatedly imagine is taken as true by your self-image, good or bad. And the other thing is, all of your behavior is controlled by what your self-image believes to be true. So you imagine yourself being bad at math, you're going to be bad at math. What's more is you're never going to try to get better at math. I'm always late, so you never make the effort to be on time. If you repeatedly, vividly imagine yourself as successful. Kobe Bryant, I saw an interview with him where he was talking about visualization and how before he goes to sleep, he will dream. That means, he will visualize, and it's before he goes to sleep. So this is, rather than a dream he has while he is asleep, this is something that he is visualizing before he goes to sleep. So he will visualize himself playing a game, and he always visualizes himself playing perfectly. And so sometimes he'll get himself, where he's playing a game and he'll score 120 points. And so he visualizes that every night before he goes to sleep. He visualizes that during the day. This is something that he repeatedly, vividly imagines. So when he actually gets out on the basketball court, this is now something he has done thousands upon thousands of times. And he lives into that success. Now, does that mean that he has ever scored 120 points in one game? No. That isn't the point. He scores 40, 50, 60 points in a game. He does extremely well. I think most people would agree that Kobe Bryant is one of the best people to ever play basketball. So everything you vividly, repeatedly imagine is accepted as true by your self-image. And your behavior is determined by what your self-image believes to be true. So if you vividly, repeatedly imagine yourself successful, wealthy, your behavior is going to line up to make you successful and wealthy. Now, successful and wealthy are vague terms. So if you're going to vividly, repeatedly imagine it, then what is your success? Is your success speaking on a stage to an audience? Is your success doing stand-up comedy? Is your success being an excellent accountant and someone who gives excellent financial advice to clients? What exactly is your success? Because it needs to be vivid, very, very detailed. The first time you imagine it, it's probably going to be a little bit vague. There will certainly be some detail. But you're going to think about it and go, I need more detail. Good. You do need more detail. So work at it, fill it in, fill in the detail. And so you might have something you imagine for the next 3 months, 4 months. And as you go, you make changes and you make tweaks. That's okay. It's the same as if you were building something and you realize that a dovetail joint will work better than a box joint. You make the change to make a dovetail joint. Okay, it's perfectly fine that as you are imagining things and you are working out the details, that you're image of who you want to be and what you want to achieve changes. That's okay. Now, of course, in the other direction, if you vividly, repeatedly imagine yourself to be a victim of any kind, then your behavior is going to line up to make you a victim. And when you see people today saying, oh, it's a racist world, oh, it's the patriarchy does this, that, or the other, or men are subjugating women, or anything along those lines, the fact that you believe it makes it true whether it's real or not. There is a very common misconception of this pay gap, that men make $1 and women make 70 cents. Okay, show me the job where that's true. Show me a job in any country where it is legal to hire a man and pay him, say, $100 an hour, and then hire a woman and pay her $70 an hour to do the same job. That's illegal in Canada, the United States, in England, in Ireland, and I can keep naming countries. That is illegal to do. And yet there is an entire social movement based upon this idea that there's a pay gap. Men get paid more than women. And yet it's blatantly untrue. You would have to say that despite it being illegal, it's still being done. Despite there being unions, the unions are participating and allowing women to be paid less than men. Okay, that just is not happening. But people believe themselves to be a victim, so they are a victim, whether it is true or not. Let's use some visuals to see how this works. Visuals are usually pretty good. Now, I do have to say, this is kind of new to me that I'm working in images like this. So I'm going to try to put them here on the screen, and I'm going to try to shrink myself up into this corner so that I can show the image and it's easy to see, and then I'm not even sure where to move my hands. I'm going to try to get me up here in this corner and get the image here to occupy a big part of the screen. So the first one is a standard representation of the self-image. And you can see everything is nice, it's neat, it's tidy, unlike life. Life is never this neat and tidy. So right in the middle, there is you, okay? And then you can see a white rectangle around you, and then there's a big gray rectangle. And notice at the outer limits, it says real limits, because there are real limits in life. For example, someone born with Down syndrome is unlikely to graduate university or become a tradesperson. That's a real limit. Other real limits, if you are, for example, Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, then packing yourself into a Mini Cooper is going to be rather difficult. Arnold Schwarzenegger is famous for saying that the Hummer is the only vehicle in which he has ever felt comfortable because it's wide enough to accommodate his upper body. Now that said, your physical size does not necessarily equal being a real limit to performance. And I want to give you a couple of examples. There's a fellow, his name is Tyrone Muggsy Bogues, and people who are fans of basketball will probably recognize his name. He is the shortest player in NBA history. He was 5 feet 3 inches tall. 5 feet 3 inches tall. And he played for 14 years in the NBA. and he averaged 7.7 points per game. Now the current average in the NBA is 8.7 points. So he's right there. Okay, he is right there with everybody else in the NBA. And we tend to think of NBA players as being, 6.5 feet, 7 feet, 7.5 feet tall. Here's a guy who is 5'3", and more than just, he played for a season with a team. He played in the NBA for 14 years. So be really careful about saying that your height or your weight or your physical appearance in any way is a limiting factor. So be careful about saying what is a limit, okay? Because there are surprisingly few real limits. We tend to invent them for ourselves. We say things, well, money doesn't grow on trees, or I can't do that, or I would never. So be careful about what you say, well, there's a limit. Push against it. See if it really is a limit. And understand that limits with which you are living right now, say you are 16 or 17 years of age, and you have yet to get a driver's license. So a limit in your life is that you are unable to drive a car because you have no driver's license. Does that equal that you cannot drive a car? No, obviously not. You just have to learn and get a driver's license. So recognize that whatever limits are in your life right now, that white rectangle, between there and what are real limits are your areas of potential. My dog is just across on the love seat, and she caught my attention. So there is a huge area of potential for all of us. And peak performance is living into those areas of potential. I'll explain more about that in a second. So let's look at a different image. This image is more the reality of life. The limits that we have as individuals are unique to us. Somebody who is 7 feet tall is going to have real difficulty living in a basement apartment where the ceiling is 7 feet high. They're going to be constantly brushing their head against that ceiling. Another one, if you watch, it's a British television show called Taskmaster. And the fellow who plays Taskmaster, his name is Greg Davies. And Greg is something in the realm of 6 feet 7 inches tall. He's a very, very tall man. And if you watch, when he walks through a doorway at different points in the film Taskmaster, he has to duck to get through the door. Okay, that's a real limit for him. If he were to walk with his head up, held high, and try to walk through the door, he would bang right into the door frame. So he has to bend his head, he has to duck down to get through a doorway. So this image, where you see the gray is a very odd shape, and the white is also a very odd shape, because we all tend to have areas where we perform well. You're growing up, you're in high school, you're in college, you're moving through life, you have a real mechanical ability, or you have really good people skills or really good sales skills. There are areas where we very naturally perform well, and those are different for all of us. When you look at the odd shape of the white area in this image, understand that some of those limits, like where it cuts in, these are self-imposed limits. And they come from things such as, I just don't like to read. Okay, well, you are deliberately, needlessly limiting yourself by being unwilling to consume information by reading. Some of these limits come from family or friends or relatives saying, "Oh, you could never do that. That isn't for you." And you hear people, especially comics, who say, "My parents are disappointed that I'm doing this because they wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor or a carpenter or whatever." And another limit that we encounter is we just fail to think, maybe I could do this a different way. So there's the way that I'm doing it, and maybe this is a way that someone showed you how to do a thing. And then we just never question it. We just keep doing it the same way. There is an apocryphal story that is very often used by motivational speakers about a son or a daughter going to their mother or their father and noticing that they always cut the end off a ham or they cut the end off a roast. And they say, "Well, why do you do that?" "Well, Grandma always did that." "Go talk to Grandma." "Grandma, why do you do?" "Well, my mother did that." "Go to talk to Great-Grandma." "Grandma, why did you always cut the end off the ham?" "Well, honey, when I was very young and we were just starting out, we only had a very small roasting pan and it would never hold the whole ham, so we had to cut the end off just to make it fit in the roasting pan." So something that started out of necessity, because they had a small roasting pan, 2 generations later is still being done because nobody bothered to stop and ask, why am I doing this? And this is true. Believe me, I have lived in construction. This happens. People will say to you, "Well, we've done it this way for 20 years. We've done it this way for 30 years. Okay. Does that mean that this is the only way to do it? Or that it's even the best way to do it?" Now, something to notice in this image is there is one point where the white area touches the gray area. Okay? That is peak performance, where your ability to do a thing and your belief that you can do a thing moves all the way to the actual limits of your ability to do a thing. That's peak performance. And I just mentioned it a little while ago, most of us have an area, very often one area, where we perform extremely well. And we tend to focus on that. Well, the truth is that you can perform that well in every area of your life. And just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, the areas, and I have them written down, are personal growth, your contribution to your community, the world around you, relationships, business, so whether you are an employee or a business owner in business, health, recreation, and your finances. These are the areas where we all experience these areas, we all live in these areas, and you can absolutely have peak performance in all of these areas. And let me switch images again. This next one is the standard representation of peak performance. You can see the white rectangle pushes almost right up against the outer limit of the gray rectangle. And remember, the outer limit of the gray, that's real limits. Real limits such as there are only 24 hours in the day. You are only able to bench press 210 pounds. That's your personal limit. Okay, so there are real limits, and peak performance is when you do well in all 7 of those areas of your life, and so you push all the way to the real limits. That's peak performance. The idea is that you free your self-image from self-imposed limits so that you can push out to your absolute peak ability to perform. Now, let me wrap up with, does everyone get to this level of success by building a strong, positive self-image? And the answer is no. There are people in the world who build success by weaseling and scheming and cheating and lying and doing all kinds of negative things. I will give you one example. Mitch McConnell. When he first went to the Senate, he was a poor person. His net worth was something like $100,000. Now his net worth is tens of millions of dollars. And he has been a politician for that whole time. And he has politicked his way into making a lot of money. Because there's no way he made that money simply from the salary of being a senator. And there are lots of people like him in the world. There are folks who inherit their wealth and never need to really make an effort to build success. And for you and for me, we need to, well, do we need to? No. There is no requirement that you build any kind of success. You can, if you choose, live your life as a victim. You can choose to live your life with very low achievement. You just grind it away day after day, just being you. You can make that choice. You can spend your days thinking about what other people are doing, how other people are succeeding, griping about, they get all the breaks and I don't get any breaks. These are all things that you can choose. You can also choose to latch on to self-help, to explore the ideas of self-help. You can choose to build a strong, positive self-image, which is going to move you forward toward building the success that you want to build. Whether that's being the best dad in the world, the best mom in the world, the best brother, the best sister, whether that's being a multimillionaire, whether that's, I'm trying to think of the two fellows that started it. There's an organization through Rotary that was started called Shelter Box. These guys never had any desire to be hugely wealthy themselves, but what they did have a desire to do was build a system where when a natural disaster or a man-made disaster occurs, they can bring a box to that place and it will have everything in it that someone needs to survive, I believe, for 1 year. So there's a tent that can sleep up to 10 people. There's a cook stove in there. There's a water filtration in there. There are pots and pans. A shelter box is this incredibly well packaged collection of items that will allow somebody to live for an extended period of time. If you remember when the earthquakes hit Haiti, and that was, I believe, 2007 or 2008, thousands of families built tent cities using all of the equipment from shelter boxes. Thousands of shelter boxes were sent to Haiti, and so people had places to live while they were cleaning up after the earthquakes. It all starts with building a strong, positive self-image. That's the key to getting value from self-help. Start there. And I look forward to hopefully having you join me in the next episode.